Okay, so I'm Ada Watkins.
I'm Leona McClinton.
I'm Evan Wilker.
I'm Pam Morales.
So this is my artwork. It's a picture of two midwives helping give birth. And um, the piece that I chose is a photograph taken in 1951 by Eugene Smith and is called Nurse Midwife, the Delivery. The photograph is black and white, and we can see in the center two women delivering a baby. The picture depicts how females have always naturally had motherly traits, and so for decades have been fulfilling caretaker roles. Even though giving birth is dangerous and can come with lots of complications, the photograph still gives a very calming feeling. When looking at the faces of the two women, we can see they have very placid expressions while still looking competent and confident in what they're doing. Another facial expression to pay attention to is the one of the newborn. Typically, right after a baby is born, they are hysterical and crying. But this baby, with its eyes closed and its mouth slightly open, looks very calm, almost like they're sleeping. This calm reaction, this calm reaction depicted reflects on the quality of the two women who are delivering the baby, like the quality of their care. Also, the fact that the picture is in black and white adds to the calming nature of the photograph. Since the picture is in black and white, it helps avert our eyes from bright red color of blood that could cause panic. Additionally, we can assume that it is nighttime because there's a lantern in the corner of the photograph, and the corners of the photograph are dark. This makes what the women are doing more impressive because at all hours of day, in all conditions, they must be ready to deliver a baby. This highlights the female's ability to adapt to change and work well in stressful situations. Finally, the framing adds to the tone of the photograph. The photograph is very zoomed in, so we can't see who else is in the room besides the two women delivering the baby and the baby itself. If we actually saw the photograph of the mother of the baby and the husband, we would most likely see panic and crying and the husband looking worried. But because the frame of the photograph excludes the mother and father, no one in the photo is panicked and it leaves the audience feeling at peace. The absence of the father from the photograph is also significant because it shows that no other support is needed to deliver the baby except the two women. This is similar to the Diaz versus Pan American court case. In this case, Pan Am argues that being a female is a bona fide occupational requirement because passengers feel more at peace and calmer in emergencies with a female flight attendant rather than a male one. This would also be the case for being a midwife or a nurse delivering a baby, since people feel more confident with females being in caretaker roles. Um, so people would prefer female nurses rather than a male one. The photograph also shows art and people's perspectives on women has changed from Western art in the 1950s. During the Western art era, men in art were seen as strong and powerful, while women were objectified and depicted as delicate and weak. An example of this Western art is Michelangelo's David sculpture and Alexander Cabanel's The Birth of Venus painting. Although in both pictures the subject of the painting is naked, in the sculpture the man is standing up and is muscular looking and powerful, while the woman in the painting is frail and weak and she's lying on the ocean and she looks almost sickly and her arm is like resting across her face. But in the midwife, the delivery photograph, the two women are the subjects and look very powerful and capable. So that shows how art has changed over time. Although this picture does have a positive connotation about female qualities, it also has a negative effect. For years, through sexism and the gender socialization theory, women have been confined to fulfill caretaker roles and take care of the needs of others while their own are not being fulfilled. An example of an agent of socialization that encourages this is toys for children. If you go to the store, you can see many toys that are marketed for girls, are dolls or kitchen sets, which encourage girls at a young age to take care of people. When these traits are learned at a young age, they can carry out into adulthood. This leaves women feeling trapped in the constant cycle of taking care of others. This theme is also evident in the article Pandemic Makes Evident Grotesque Gender Inequality in Household Work. This article states how Mothers have to bear the mental load due to everyone else's learned helplessness, which creates an impossible to escape cycle. Women help more, everyone else develops helplessness, which increases her mental load. This unfair inverse cycle leaves women feeling like their freedom is being confiscated. In conclusion, the photograph Nurse Midwife the Delivery shows how women have motherly traits that can make people feel at peace. This trait gives women lots of power in society, which has drastically changed over time. But some consequences of this trait can leave women feeling trapped in caretaker roles.
And just go straight up.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Liana one more time. So my picture is self-portrait as Dirty Princess. Uh-oh. That's it. If you can see that. Eek. Basically, this picture painting is an oil painting that depicts a woman standing with a skirt made out of flowers and dead animals in this grand hallway with a lot of like beautiful 17th century architecture. There's a lot of golds and pinks and just a lot going on. It was done by Julie Heffernan in 2004, so it's more of a recent painting. During this time, you have a lot of war going on in the Middle East and also a lot of discussions about women's roles in the workplace. Not as much as in like the 50s and 60s, but still a discussion. So this is actually part of a series of paintings. The other two are called Self-Portrait with Beast and Self-Portrait with Tree. And it shows the same blonde woman who's naked. And in Self-Portrait with Beast, she's dragging a dead monster into a room through a window. And in Self-Portrait with Tree is her dragging a like lifeless tree in through a doorway. So I thought that was interesting, like kind of the trio of these things showing natural life being brought into like a domestic area. Pretty interesting. And all of them kind of have that similar theme of death and decay, birth and fertility, and really anything referring to the circle of life. I went to see the Akron for another art history class as well, which is where I first saw this, and we were talking about technology and relating this painting to technology. And we talked about the idea of capitalism and how Americans, because this artist is American, tend to take and take without thinking about the effects that they're having on the environment. So I think this can relate to gender in the way that this woman is kind of wearing death as a centerpiece for her outfit. It's like a giant skirt made out of all of the things that it took to make it. We also talked about the contrast between all of the natural life and then the backdrop of the paintings and the chandelier and the great marble everything, golden everything, kind of shows how we take for granted the things that are happening naturally outside. I saw the use of the skirt as her wearing the life cycle. So she's being held down by it, and it's kind of a reimagination of Mother Nature. And you see femininity displayed as an idea of life and death, as it is in portraitures of women since the beginning of time. It also could have been seen as an idea of protest, so it's kind of muddying up the traditional domestic sphere, bringing in things that aren't traditionally seen in these kinds of paintings to show that women are fighting back. She seems very confident in herself with all of the things that she's embracing, and I think that shows kind of a protest of the typical domestic ideas about women. Also, the use of nudity is very interesting because that's kind of definitely a motif for portraiture of women. She's got her boobs out in all three paintings, and I think it's definitely a centerpiece, a central part of the painting because it's right in the center of the painting. And I think it shows also the idea of breastfeeding and how that brings life and how that brought life to all of these animals. I think I'm kind of jumping around now. The idea of structural capitalism, structural sexism, and capitalism is very present here as well because um, um, okay. Okay. Another idea that I had about this is that it is an example of women as the answer to male greed. So in the background, there's paintings of, men killing each other and men skinning animals alive. And then you have her standing in front of it and rising above it. So with the chandelier raining down fish and bubbles and the skirt rising up into her, it's kind of just a great representation of how women can change the way things are while also being part of the problem. And I think that's mainly what I took away from it, are women as a sign of hope in this dark, dark, hopeless place. Thank you.
Okay. I'm Evan Wilker, and my painting is called um it's called Germanicus and Agrippina, and it's by Peter Paul Rubens, and it was painted in 1615. This one up because it's bigger. Okay. So Peter Paul Rubens was a Flemish artist, and he was born in 1577, and he was highly influenced by aspects of classical Christian antiquity and Baroque style. And this particular work depicts the heads of Germanicus, who was a highly respected commander-in-chief from the Roman Empire, and Agrippina, which was his wife and also the granddaughter of the famous Emperor Augustus. And in class, we learned about the portrayal of gender in art prior to the feminist art movement, where the male body was definitely considered the ideal figure, while women's bodies were given much less autonomy and they were more used just to satisfy the male gaze and to appear beautiful outwardly. And this particular work doesn't, like as many canonical Renaissance era works by male artists like The Birth of Venus, it doesn't objectify necessarily the woman in the painting, but it definitely expresses a lot of meaningful differences between male and female figures. At first glance, the figures look very similar. They're both forms that are idealized beauty and they're classical and they have similar facial structures and expressions. But upon taking a closer look, there are definitely differences. Agrippina, the woman, has considerably paler and more angelically white skin, which while Germanicus is slightly more olive and tan, and this gives Agrippina a more like angelic, innocent, pure look to her. In addition, the shadows, even though they're like looking the same direction and they're in the same lighting and have the same angle that their faces are at, the shadows are significantly more intense on Germanicus's neck and jawline compared to Agrippina's, which gives him a more harsh look. These shadows emphasize the muscles on his neck, his features such as his jawline, his like sharp nose, and like the arch of his eyebrows. And this makes him seem more powerful and regal. The lack of intense shadowing on Agrippina, on the other hand, makes her just look softer and again more innocent. And though their expressions seem at first glance to be pretty identical, they're actually differentiated by a slight further arch of Germanicus's eyebrow, which gives him a more thoughtful, intelligent, and bold look, as opposed to Agrippina, whose expression is just more like soft and so I guess that's okay. Soft and less like intense. In addition, the clothes that they are dressed in differ.
Agrippina wears all white clothing with pearls on the top of her head. The white clothing further adds to the angelic and innocent appearance that she has, and the pearls can be seen as not only a sign of her wealth, but a sign of vanity, depicting her as more fickle and concerned with her appearance. In addition, pearls have been historically seen as feminine jewels, as opposed to other jewels like diamonds, because they're just seen as like pure and fair to look at, and like they're usually just seen as a sign of modesty and purity. Then on the other hand, Germanicus, he wears all red, which contributes to his more bold and intense look. And then instead of pearls, he wears a laurel wreath, which is symbolic in classical antiquity because of the laurel wreath's position as a symbol of victory. In archaic Greece, wreaths like the one that Germanicus wears on his head were the prizes competed for in the Pan-Hellenic Games, such as the Olympics. And in Rome, they were a traditional Roman military decoration. It makes sense that Germanicus has this laurel wreath on his head because he was a commander-in-chief of the army, and it also gives him an additional sense of power and triumph. The historical significance of the wreath is much more masculine and powerful than that of the pearls, which are simply an expression of beauty. In addition, Germanicus is clearly placed in front of Agrippina in the traditional fashion for overlapping portraits, meaning that he has the position of pride and power. Agrippina is overshadowed by Germanicus's form, her full face and hair not even visible. Though there's no clear evidence that Rubens set out intentionally to make this work a statement on the position of women in comparison to men, the way that Agrippina and Germanicus are rendered in this double portrait makes it easy to see the factors that distinguish those of different genders. And I find this work really interesting because it shows the idea that throughout history, women have been treated as lesser in the art world, even if it wasn't like a specific work about sexuality and gender. They have always been rendered as less great.
My name is Pam, and this is my artwork. So my piece of artwork is called Atala and Chakas, created in 1828 by Anna de Epinais. And this painting depicts two lovers in a lush natural setting with palm trees and blossoms that mirror the colors of the woman's sash and the man's clothing. The setting of this landscape presents a flawless, romanticized environment for their love story. It can be seen as a reflection of the 19th century concept of an untouched, parasitical environment where love and desire could flourish without societal constraints. It contributes to the notion of love as pure and uncontaminated by worldly influences, conforming to the gender norms of that era, which often is idolized as romantic love as a virtue for women. The painting's inspiration is from a scene in a novel, which further emphasizes the importance of gender themes. Atala, a young mixed-race Christian woman, vowing celibacy before falling in love with Chakas, a young Natchez man, introduces complex dynamics related to gender, chastity, and love. This vow serves as a point of tension and challenge to these gender norms as it underscores her journey from chastity to love, thereby defying traditional expectations. Atala, the female character, is portrayed with a sense of purity and vulnerability. Her white clothing, serene expression, and the presence of a cross around her neck emphasizes her Christian virtues and her commitment to celibacy. And this representation aligns with the 19th century ideal of the modest and virtuous in women. On the other hand, the male character, Chaktas, provides a counterpoint to Atala's representation. He is portrayed as a more robust and passionate about protecting and comforting her, fitting the notion of masculinity as being the bigger person. You can see this through the characters' gazes and body language to emphasize traditional gender dynamics. Atala's downward gaze resting on the man's shoulder signifies submission, while Chakta's direct gaze expresses desire and assertiveness, which aligns with the ideal of a strong dominant male. However, in this painting, it is not merely an obedient reflection of established gender roles, as it challenges these roles by unfolding Atala's transformation from celibacy to love, offering a glimpse into the evolving discourse of women's agency and desires during the 19th century. This hints at a more progressive perspective on gender and relationships, subtly pushing the boundaries during this time's gender roles. This painting also explores the idea of gender as intertwined with culture. Their clothing signify the influence of culture on gender identity. The woman's commitment to Western Christian ideals reflect on how European colonial values shape gender roles in colonized societies. Chaktas, on the other hand, the man, represent indigenous culture resisting assimilation into Western norms, which defies traditional gender expectations imposed by European colonizers. And this juxtaposition invites us to consider how cultural backgrounds can both reinforce and challenge traditional gender roles. And it underscores the gender norms that gender norms are not universally defined, but are deeply intertwined with the cultural context in which individuals find themselves. Overall, we see a portrayal of gender that reflects in societal norms and values of the 19th century, emphasizing the contrast between chastity and passion and interplay between European and Native American influences. It raises the thought about how gender and cultural identity is intertwined in the representation of these characters.
So it says to begin our discussion before we go into the questions with our general thoughts and responses to the various 5-minute presentations. Awesome. Great job, everybody. I wish I had prepared more of a script personally, but that was just me. What about you guys? How do you feel it went?
I really liked everyone's artwork. I feel like for mine it was like more of just a photograph, so there wasn't a lot of like history or like historical influences, but I really liked how everyone else's had like a historical background that influenced like how the artists like did their artwork.
I really particularly liked your just like that work was really cool. Like the way that it like all the junk and stuff
Trashy.
like became a dress of her body. I thought that was really interesting.
And I liked how like you brought in like her other artworks as well and like compared like her like artwork style and stuff. Made your argument stronger.
Thanks. I really loved your painting in general, just like the solitude of it all, and like the way you brought up the scene, how like the scenery affected the actual characters. It's like I definitely felt it just looking at the painting. What you're saying is
We go to the question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start.
55. Yeah, go with your first question, Peter.
Yes. Okay. Um. what did I say? Okay. How did the artist gender, like, how do we like take that into account when analyzing artwork? I guess like more specifically, like, should we take their gender into account, and how much so when analyzing art?
Um, well, personally, I think that like not every single work should be analyzed with the perspective of the gender of the artist because like some works really are not a statement on gender at all. And it would be kind of like if like a female artist made a work that had nothing to do with gender and then like we analyzed it according to her gender, it would kind of like make it seem like her work didn't matter and it was only her gender that mattered. But I do think like at least all of the artworks that we're talking about and like artworks that do relate to gender, like it's definitely really important to look at the gender of the artist because that like alters the perspective that they would have and their goals.
Yeah, I feel like this. Oh, to kind of answer my own question, I feel like it's kind of, you have to take into like a lot of things into account. Like it's not like a black and white answer, but I do feel like it could like bring up more like sexism if you do like take in the gender into account. Because like if people are looking at art, but the first thing they see is like, okay, this is by a female artist, like they might be like, okay, I'm just not gonna look at it then. So people might just totally like disregard artwork by females. And I feel like we can like see that in history when like a female like writes a book or something, or and she like changes her name, or like I think it's probably done in like artwork too in the past.
I know in my political science class, we talked about the norm cycle, and we talked about how it starts with you introducing an issue, people talking about it a whole lot, and then it achieving a taken for granted status, meaning that nobody talks about it anymore. They just accept it. I think right now we're kind of in that like crazy period where like we're all trying to figure out what gender and sex is and calling out the sexism that's been going on for thousands of years. And that's why it's important to take gender into account now. But I hope that like over time, as we get further and further into progress, it won't have to be as much of an issue or as much of a part of your identity if you don't want it to be.
I think like looking into artwork, like you shouldn't, like what you said, like you shouldn't like base their artwork just because they're male or female. Because I think every artwork has its own like value and like it's not, it shouldn't be devalued just because of their gender. But in my sociology class, an example of like male and female thing, like on a resume, like they had every single thing the same thing. The only thing different was their names, and I think like the male got hired and not the female. So I feel like you shouldn't like sex and gender, like you shouldn't like it shouldn't be like rewarded on different levels, if that makes sense.
Okay, one of my questions, and I think maybe Evan already answered this in yours, but do the paintings that you chose remind you of a landmark court case that we've discussed, or can you connect it to one of them?
You talked about that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it was you.
Yeah.
sorry,
Mine
sorry.
was with the Pan American court case. It was just about the like the bona fide female like, you know what I'm saying? Sorry.
Occupational.
Yeah,
Something.
the occupational the bona fide occupational requirement of being a female. So, yeah.
I know with mine, it reminded me of a little bit of the Haraz thing, and oh, not the Haraz thing, the woman that didn't Now one to wear her own clothes.
Oh, was it the makeup one?
I'm not thinking of Haraz. I'm gonna say it reminds me of Haraz and kind of the idea that women are what they put on themselves. And so with the Haraz thing, it's like, well, like women do wear makeup, so just do it. Like it only takes you 5 minutes. I think that kind of ties to this, and that you always see women depicted with those extra things to prove that they're feminine and to prove that they're a woman.
If I were to say a court case for mine, I feel like I would agree with you. The one where she had to wear makeup in order to like seem more womanly, because not that in my painting the woman is necessarily wearing makeup, but she's just painted more like pale and pretty and innocent looking than the man, which just like makes it seem like that is the facade that women have to keep up in order to be like accepted by society.
I think it's called the Jefferson.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The Jefferson versus Pop, or I don't know. But yeah, I would say that for my painting also, because like the female in mine is like seen as, yeah, Jefferson versus Haraz. The female is seen as like innocent and like relying on the man, but the man is like robust and assertive. And I think in the makeup one, like you have to like dress a certain way to like seen as like you want to like present yourself in a way for customers and stuff. So I think the man comforting the woman in my painting, he wants seen as like the protective man, like who like the female can go to her with her problems.
Amen.
Okay. My first question is, how do the ideas about gender that are expressed in older works compare to and differ from those expressed in more modern works?
Well, in like the Western art time, like women were like seen as like really just like delicate and like weak, and they just mostly be like objectified. Like there were a lot of like females in artwork, like specifically like naked females, but like no like female artists. So, but now like there's more like females are more like there's more prevalent like female artists and like there's just more powerful females in artwork as well.
I can talk on my own question. One thing I agree with you about, like just like the way that like women's bodies are represented is just like very, not to say that there is no objectification of women in modern work, but there's definitely more recognition of like the implications that that has, and like there is actually like feminist artwork, which I don't, maybe there was feminist artwork in like classical times, but it wasn't really like relevant, like nobody wanted to see it, and now there's actually like famous feminist art that like attempts to like liberate women and like empower them, which is definitely different than the like confining ideas about gender from the older works.
I think to continue on to yours, I feel like older work, like or at least society back then, like seeing artwork and like where they're like naked and stuff, they like seem like disgusted and stuff, but now they're like more comfortable and more like accepting and stuff. So I think that's really cool how it's has like evolved.
I know with mine, since it's a modern painting based on a classical period, you can kind of see the changes over time. And in this one, I noticed how usually you see women depicted in older times, kind of in a space just to be in the space. And it's more about making the space look more beautiful than making than having any meaning within themselves. And I think when you see modern pieces now, there's more of an emphasis on the woman and what she's doing there and what she means within herself. And I think that's also an important change that has occurred over time.
I guess moving on. My question is, how do these artworks challenge or conform to gender norms and expectations in the 19th century? Which kind of goes off to what we kind of talked about. I can go. Or okay. I said like many artworks in general like reflect men as the dominant person, like the breadwinner, and females as the homemakers. And they are depicted in like domestic settings, like in the kitchen, showing like just being mothers and stuff and being like nurturing. And then in contrast, like men are seen as like powerful and assertive figures. So yeah, in the 19th century, they like witnessed like the rise of feminist movements and literary works that challenge these traditional gender roles.
Yeah, I would say mine. Mine kind of like it. Um, it kind of goes with the norms of women like being caretakers, but I feel like it does challenge it a bit because it. I don't know. I feel like no one really paid attention to how much midwives have to do and how um, hard of a job it is. So I think the photograph um, just pointed more attention to the difficulty of being a midwife and how the women that do it have to be very just strong and powerful and have to have lots of skill to do it.
One thing I noticed was challenged in mine is that it's taken like the classic nude portraiture of a woman and given her kind of a different pose. I feel like usually when you see a naked woman before the 19th century, it's very passive. She's there to be looked at. But in this one, she's looking right at the viewer, and she's got this like kind of terrifying smirk on her face. And she's got her hands frayed out, and she's got a little bevel. And I think her confidence that she's emitting is kind of a big challenge of what we're usually supposed to emit when we're nude. We're supposed to just emit virginity and passivity.
Well, mine doesn't exactly challenge like 19th century values since it was made in like the 1600s, but it does like I guess it could like align with the ideas of like 19th century gender because it does like show the woman as more passive and more innocent, and it doesn't really give her like the man he has like his expression just shows more like intelligence and thoughtfulness, while hers is just kind of like she's just kind of there, like you were saying, like she doesn't have that much of an identity and like even though she is the son of Emperor Augustus, she's still like the least important person in the painting, which like she's really famous, so I feel like she should be the most important, and so it just kind of like goes along with the ideas of women being less in power.
And something I noticed in your painting is that the male is in front and then the female is in the back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it kind of shows how females are what's important, at
Definitely.
least in that painting.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it looks to me like she's kind of like an extension of him because she's behind him.
Yeah, like she doesn't even have to be there. Like it's mostly just him.
Yeah, like in the shadow.
Yeah. Exactly.
So good. That's why I added a comment.
Okay, so for my next question was, it's a little bit repetitive. How have the
Wolf
themes of gender in our work changed over time?
We'll be more broad with our answers.
Yeah. So more specifically with like themes.
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 Well-
Themes.
Well, we
Sorry,
can definitely
guys.
say that like the themes we've been talking about, like the 4 themes of feminist art, which are like celebrating women's bodies and empowering their bodies, celebrating women's crafts, like elevating crafting and making a different like circle for female artists so that they're not really in the main canon. And then the last one, which is like a understanding like the way that gender roles and stuff have developed throughout time, and then taking that into account while you make the feminist artworks. And I feel like those themes have were definitely not present before, so those have definitely like developed throughout time.
That was a good answer.
It was. I'd like to elaborate. I'd like to focus on one of the themes if you guys would like to take any of the others. Focusing primarily on the one about having a separate sphere for women, I think as we hopefully get closer and closer to achieving some sense of equality between men and women and everybody in between, I think we're getting closer to not having those separate spheres and it not being important. I think early on in feminist work, it was like finding safe spaces for women because most men were abusive, dirty assholes, a-holes. And as we work towards change, hopefully that will start to fizzle out and a woman's space will also be, a man's space will also be anybody's space because we'll all be free.
I can say how the themes in gender in our work have not changed over time. So my photograph was, while I was like writing my analysis of it, the whole time I was like, oh, this was taken by a female. I looked it up. Eugene is a male. I thought it was a female, but he was a male. So I would say like the themes of like just representation, not specifically with artwork, but like the artist. I still feel like I was looking up like the photograph online and seeing what people had to say about it, and it was like very heavily praised, which I mean it should be, but I feel like there is like it's still like men getting a lot of the praise and less with women. So I just think how that thing's not changed over time. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. My second one hopefully will take a lot of time. If you wanted to make your painting more relevant to current events, what is one thing you would add to it or take away? And so like for example with mine, an idea would be maybe if even though this was done in 2004, but if you kind of added like maybe like oil spills to the animals, it could be more of like an environmental message and how we take and then we have oil spills. So yes.
Mine, well, you could say that it's not very modern. So in order to make it more relevant, I mean, I feel like number one, like this kind of portrait isn't done that much anymore, like with just like 2 people just like randomly staring at nothing with like no background or anything. So I feel like in order to connect it to more like modern themes of history, you would probably have to have them like actually in a setting doing something or like with some kind of like significance behind why they're sitting there. And also, um, their dress and attire is not very modern, so you could change that.
First of all, I just want to say that was a really good question. I
Thank
really like
you.
it.
Let's talk about that for 3 minutes.
um, I think for mine, the so the like the woman was giving birth, like the midwives were like helping giving birth in like a house, but I think now it would obviously probably be in a hospital. But I think to highlight something like that's relevant is like COVID and stuff. So probably like the nurses or like the doctor like helping give birth, like they would be in like N95 masks, and that would probably help highlight how like COVID has like taken a toll on like the hospitals and everything, and how like nurses and people like that work in the medical field should be like represented more and given more like I know there's been like strikes about like hours and like COVID safety and stuff, how like the nurses and people are like being exposed to like COVID and stuff without um kind of getting like help with that. And so yeah, having it in the hospital would help represent those problems a little more.
Something I would change in my painting is the roles reversed. The man like being more open to being vulnerable and showing his emotion to the female instead of the female being the one who is like laying on the man and just like being comforted. So yeah, I would. So I feel like in today's society, it's slowly becoming that, like, or at least it's being more accepting. I know back in the day, like, I think men were supposed to be like tough and stuff, um, not showing emotion. So definitely being more vulnerable and open to sharing their feelings.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. I know when I thought of that question, I thought of that painting because I just like pictured it. This is really dark, but like with it, like a pipeline going through it and kind of the description
Oh.
of indigenous land.
Mm.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay. So my question is, do you think all of these works were created with gender in mind, or do you think it was just internal biases among the artists and the viewers that caused the work to reflect ideas about gender? And in retrospect, that question, I mean, some of these works, like yours, I feel like is definitely about gender, but like maybe just like, do you think all works that we analyze with a gender lens were necessarily created?
No, I think I mean a lot of artworks are with the intention of being analyzed through like a gender perspective, but a lot of them aren't. There's like obviously sexism is a problem, but there's also other problems too that artists want to highlight. So I do think um we shouldn't like just focus on gender. Like there's a lot of other things to that artists also just want to highlight.
Yeah, I was gonna say like, I don't think they like their initial first thought is like I'm gonna make the art about gender, but like once they make the art, I feel like you can incorporate gender aspects within it, so then it kind of, I guess, flows well.
Yeah. I think for the work that I depict, I like don't really think that the artist set out just to make this like a statement about gender, but I do think like the way that he like, I mean not to, I'm like assuming all this about him, but like just like the way that women and men were just like seen at the time kind of influenced the renditions of the man and the woman to like reflect societal ideas about gender. But I don't think like that was the goal. I think the goal was probably just to paint a portrait of those people. So I think like a lot of times when we analyze like artworks, it could be less about like, or I mean, it depends on the work, but some of them could be less about the artist's intentions and more about like the end result and the way that it's viewed by society.
I agree. I think yours is definitely the best example of like unconscious bias in a painting and not being thought of then, but us discussing it now. So yeah.
I think just to like tie this into what we're talking about in class, I forget what the painting was, but it was the one we looked at yesterday, where like it was like one was like the old one where she was like naked and then like the
Oh,
newer
The Cindy
one.
Sherman,
Yeah, I forgot what that one was called.
I think it was just Untitled.
Oh, I think yeah, I think
Oh.
you're right. And like the newer one was like she was recreating that she was pregnant. Like the first one, like really just like wasn't about gender. It was more of just like the artist like thought this one was really pretty and wanted to paint it.
Mhm.
And then the newer one was about gender and was criticizing how women have been objectified and things like that. So I think that just shows how artwork has changed like over time, like through like wanting to see it through like a gender perspective and like highlight sexism and stuff. Um,
Into our last
Mine is, how has the representation of gender in art been influenced by different cultural, regional, or global perspectives?
You said it was how was the representation of gender? in art?
Yes.
Okay.
I think mine is definitely a very European look to it. You've got the Renaissance architecture and the pasty blonde white woman. Wait, what's the question? I was right. Cultural
Yeah.
something.
How has the representation of gender in art been influenced by
Influenced.
different cultural, regional, or global
Mhm.
perspectives?
Yes, and so I think that European aspect is definitely like heavily played upon in this work. And if it were coming from a different region, you definitely see the different gender norms put there. For example, if you brought this from an Asian culture, I don't think she would be naked because that's not really a sign of power or passivity in Asian art. It's more so the drapery and like the signs of wealth through your clothing instead of lack of. And so I think it's just very based on their societal values and how gender has developed with their culture over time. And so this would definitely change in different regions of the world.
For I remember like when I went to Ackland, there was one work that I was thinking about picking, and it was like a sculpture. It was an African sculpture from like a long time ago. I don't know when, but it was a sculpture of a woman, and I thought it was interesting because like she had like really big breasts and like she was pregnant, and those are like it just like wasn't the type of body that is usually celebrated in Western art. It didn't look like the like stereotypical like super pretty like body, and I thought it was interesting because it's like in that culture it's clear that like the beauty of women was more based on like if you have big boobs and you're pregnant, like you're gonna be like providing children and like helping, and so that was more the beauty of women instead of just like the aesthetic ideas.
I think like we've talked about a lot how race and gender have kind of gone hand in hand in like discrimination and stuff like that. So in like in my photograph, I didn't really talk about this, but I kind of just realized now that this was relevant. The two midwives are African American, and I think that well, like obviously like the mammy character had kind of um showed that or stereotyped African American women as like caretakers and kind of like obviously forced them in that role, which was not good. But that also had the same overlap with like women were also seen as like caretakers and stuff. So yeah, just like the overlap with that.
something.
Yeah, in my artwork, it's the man he's Native American. So I feel like you don't really see a lot of artworks from different cultures and stuff. I feel like it's all like white dominated, like stereotypical male dominated, female stereotypes. So I think it's really cool to see like different cultures being valued through artwork for the world to see. So,
And on that note, and we're all done.
thank you.
Thank you. How do you end the recording?
What?